service. I think we have a trainer in the basement now or something like that, that we could go once a week, come in, here we go, here's, that people can self-educate themselves once they're getting some training. Some people are just scared of the website or don't know where to go.
It's a really good question. It's a really good question. Yeah. Really?
The feedback form on the website should be working. If it hasn't, we get stuff regularly.
How do you close that?
It goes to the, yeah, I mean,
Okay.
Yeah.
it's definitely to the system that we have to look into, like what Tom has established to, have it, more holistically fit the whole organization.
I'll cut Lou off if you can.
Lou.
Lou, sorry. But,
we were talking about how council or how staff and specifically the departments communicate with us on maybe a weekly basis and could the provision of more details, and absolutely I think that's great. The more the merrier. And then I thought about the comments, Mark, you were referring to Rob yourself. It's kind of how you interact and disseminate, hey, this is an issue. And so I was just thinking about, well, maybe I'm a happy, I don't know about a happy meeting, but I think I'm somewhere in the middle. And maybe it's familiar background to yourself, and that if I've brought it to staff, it's an issue. It's a big issue, and I don't want to have to check in. Hey, where are we? What's happening with this? Was this just that you fielded my phone call and it's not being actively worked on at all? Essentially, if I made the phone call or sent the email, I just have an assumption that it's being worked on until a period of time goes by that I think, well, I've never heard back. I don't see it happening, and now I have to follow up. I see that happening a lot less than previous to the last few months, which is why I said, Mark, maybe you should maybe I don't need to speak to that. But I also had a couple of staff members kind of send me a follow-up email saying, I never heard back from you when I gave you this, and there was a question in there, which direction do we go? Or that sort of thing. And so there was a breakdown there too. And so I know that I need to do a better job, and I'm actively putting a process in place to do that sort of thing too. So I thought, if nothing else, I'll share that and take it for what it is.
I share that challenge of doing a better job. We're busy, and this isn't an excuse, but it's an explanation. Sometimes if you have a question, you need to tell me there's a question built into the commentary, because I will not read the weather report. If it starts with a weather report, I'll skim that. If there was a question buried in there, I'm going to miss it. So, you have to be, and this works both ways. If I ask a question, let's say a pothole, unless I see it again, or unless I hit it again, fall into it again, I'm not gonna follow up on that. Unless I happen to see, I was back to Wawa today. That pothole's reopened now. Part of it. It's not as big as it used to be. You won't lose whole cars in it, but it's obviously a potential problem. But yeah, I run that risk of having read something quickly, and I need to do a better job of that. So, but if I miss something, come back to me. I'm human. Don't jump because I'm a council person. Sometimes when I call the city, I don't say who I am, because I'm not calling as a council person. I'm calling as a resident, and it's really interesting to see what response you get when that happens from some departments, because it is different in some departments. And it shouldn't be. Here's my perspective, my personal feeling. You know, first off, if I'm laying it on you because this is Councilman Moorhead calling, that's not right. And then if I call as a resident and I don't get the service excellence, that's not right either. So there's a happy medium somewhere. But yeah, if I've let staff down, tag me back.
Well, you mentioned a minute ago about public inquisition, right? You mentioned that. Do you want to come back to that?
Yeah, I wanted to hear more from staff on
Yeah,
the, because we just expanded as council the public comment section to each item versus just at the beginning. So I'd like to hear more about it.
I got a couple of comments on that. Some of it's
Introduce
personal.
yourself, please.
I'm sorry, I'm Lou Vitolo, I'm the city's finance director. I'd like to tie in Marge's comments about respect to the inquisition part of it. I agree that the way that this government should work is the people, they elect council, council has Carol, and then Carol has staff. But I think there's 14 days or 13 and a half days in every 2-week period where the public can be involved with their council person. When we get to the meetings, my personal opinion is that the function of the meeting should be, council has its deliberations because your hands are tied for those 13 and a half days of the week, of the 2-week period. So the floor is the time when you guys hash everything out. When the public gets involved and demonstrates a lack of respect, it undermines the whole process and it can be very disruptive. Respect is a very simple thing. I mean, picture this. Suppose I hit a home run on a financial report or something. I do a great job. All right, and then I botch the next 5. Just because I did a good job in the first one, does that mean that you guys should be applauding me and celebrating each of the 5 failures thereafter? No. So the same goes if there's a questionable decision or a mistake or a poor job or some kind of disagreement in one area. That doesn't give the public or anyone else the right to question and beat us up on everything else after that. The next 5 were great jobs, okay? So I don't like how there's a translation of one item or one performance or one project that flows into everything else. That's really what I think this is about. Nothing is good enough anymore. Everything is questioned. It's just frustrating to be in that role where people are acting uncivilly. I mean, it's just public comment is the period where there's rules. There's rules of decorum. You got 3 minutes. You can state your opinion, and council can react as they see. But it shouldn't devolve into this kind of question and answer or finger pointing session that I see at all these meetings. And in a way, I mean, this is an appeal from me to the public to just ask to calm it down and respect the process. We work hard on a daily basis to just try to do the best we can to take direction from council and Carol. And it's just frustrating to have everything so fiercely second guessed at times, and it really has evolved into something that's not pleasant and overwhelming.
Just to add to that, on some of the larger topics we've been discussing, either policies and things. Earlier, as I said, I wanted to comment, there was, really solicit what does the public feel and think, which is important, like we've said before, if we agree to disagree, there's ways to do it better. But there's also members who openly had commentary at the lectern. And then staff continues to try to say, try to engage the public in any capacity we can. And we say, Dave, you can call me 24/7, email me 24/7, we'll come meet with you. And they openly sit there and tell you, what, it doesn't matter what you tell me, I'm never just going to agree with you, so I don't want to hear your side, I'm going to go get my public comment. So there's a balance from staff side to say, that's what you're soliciting want to hear, yet the commentary is openly telling staff, I don't really care, want to learn your side, I'm going to get mine, and so staff is like, we don't want to be adversary to council, but the opinions that are solicited at times, that's not everyone, don't get me wrong, we're saying we want public comment, but the leverage to say, and then we say, well, see, there's a comment, and now we have to react to that. It's like, well, we've been trying, but there's not a two-way door there. I think that's part of some of the frustration, too. And so there's a balance there, and it's a balance of how you get there as a group. And that obviously goes with lines of communication. Maybe it's a fair point, like you said earlier, Rob, that you want to hear it sooner. you know, staff is also here to say how you to do your job. It's a balance too. We can't tell you how to be an elected official. Just like, you know, there's that balance too. You know, so we have to make sure we frame it to say you shouldn't listen to the following person. No one feels that we should be in that spot or feel comfortable making that spot, but we definitely want to try to relay, say, are you aware that this is what their conversations are with staff? You know, they're just trying to find that balance. And I think that's some Lou and some of the other staff members' feelings on that.
So is it,
Sorry, I was going to say also from a technical perspective, as far as being the person who, you know, records or tries to, you know, keep up on what's going on with the meetings, it's very disruptive when there are folks talking in the audience while other people are talking, while we're trying to make sure that comments are being recorded so we can accurately convey them later in the minutes. So, and that is time consuming on our effort on the back end in trying to produce these minutes, because you're having to kind of disseminate out what everybody's saying. It also, I know we have several hearing impaired individuals who are in our audience at council, and they're not able to hear what's going on with council, or during council debate and during staff comments while, you know, folks are talking in the audience. It's not that we don't appreciate public input, but from a technical side of it and trying to, you know, have a cohesive meeting and trying to fulfill all the requirements. I know, you know, we've been working really hard over the last year to try and make the recordings better, make improvements in the council chamber, but that also makes the microphones more sensitive, so more things get picked up, and that can make things more difficult in trying to provide a good product for people who aren't able to attend the meetings, who want to be able to hear what's going on.
And we're all guilty of that. Staff is guilty of that. When they used to sit across the back of the room and I was over on the far side of the room, you know, I had extreme difficulty hearing because this ear was pointed out to that wall, and staff was chattering constantly in the back of the room, and we've had conversations about that. Council does it, we talk to each other, you know. So this is part of your job, is to respect the person that's speaking, enforce that respect, force that, the room, if you will, force those rules to some degree. Having said that, we need to make sure that the public feel that their interaction is welcome. And again, even today, we said, yeah, you can talk last, or you can talk when we're done talking. We don't want to hear your ideas until we're done. Or we don't want to hear your solutions until we're done. So I don't think, you know, the way we do this is critically important. And when you're getting an inquisition, that should be a signal that there's a communication problem. From whoever it's from. If it's from a staff member, it's a communication problem with me. If it's with the public, it's a communication problem with them. You know, people will, you know, we are fighting the perception that we do things behind closed doors. The solution to that is to not do that and to communicate more, not less. It's a two-way street, I grant that.
That's what we're saying. The frustrating part is when there's a local members at a council meeting who will deny the time to spend with staff, but they're.
And what I'm saying is we continue to do it even here, now, even in this meeting. We've shut them up. You can't talk.
and the problem doesn't seem to be the question. You're more saying approach.
Well, and comment, I mean, that's part of the process.
And we have a little problem in the council chamber because the public is supposed to address the chair, the council, and then the council, through you, Polly, can ask the staff member a question. But we do get into the direct battles sometimes, which definitely I think is part of the issue. You know, we've had some, especially finance is a big issue. Funding is a big issue. You know, we have some members of the community that definitely have disagreements. You know, with those groups, we have to keep that cordial. We have to keep that. But sometimes I like the public comment because they bring up some stuff that I didn't think to even ask before the meeting. So I know Dr. Morgan's had a lot of good stuff over the last few months that, raises some other questions.
We're not against public comment.
Yeah.
I don't know about
You're talking about the approach.
Well, No, and I was gonna say, I don't think he's here today, but Dr. Morgan is a great example of someone who has offered wonderful comments. He always submits to me his written comments to make things easier in minutes. He always makes sure he comes to the microphone to speak. He asked permission from the chair to, take part. And I think, I'm singling him out because of using him as an example, but, from a technical side, I've reached out to groups and said, we love the public input, but if you have a written out 3-minute, 1-pager, hand it to me. I'll include it in the minutes. That makes our lives easier. We want the inclusion, we want the input, but it's not that we don't want it, it's that we want there to be a respect and an efficiently run meeting, which I think we can do with that, and still have wonderful public discourse.
I mean, not everyone's gonna provide a written.
And I understand that. I'm not asking everyone to, but I mean, there's getting back to the technical side of it. Before, the comments made it at the microphone as part of public comment, and everybody gets their chance. And I think I'm not a council member, but I would hope that all the council members are receptive to those comments, and I think you are. But it's, for me personally, in trying to do my job, it's the disruptiveness from the audience while other folks are speaking that makes things more difficult.
I think that's on us as a council to follow our procedure and make sure that we can stop those disruptions.
Coming back to the respect issue, I mean, we're trying to have a professional meeting, and actually, I've found, in my experience, no matter how bad the topic is or how angry it is, I find that I can make my presentation much more powerful and much more acceptable to who I'm presenting it to if I can find professional, courteous words to get my point across. Because I found people just are much more receptive to, you've really thought this through, you've taken the time, you have really good points, and I'm really considerate. And that goes back to how you frame it.
It's a learned art.
Yep.
We don't offer classes in that. Maybe that's something you can help us with during our orientation.
Well, when I have groups come before council, I will talk to them about how you present things in a fashion that will get your point across, and council will be more receptive to how you present it.
It would be nice for me to know if you have reached out to people and received a comment such as that. I would love for you to share that with me. Okay.
It's not being us to make sure we do a better job making you aware of that.
I'm probably stating the obvious here. Our public process invites and allows certain activities of, I had the opportunity to raise a question for the sake of raising a question and calling into question everything that comes to play, right? And so certain folks have the ability, the freedom to do that. As members of staff and as members of council, I think it's our jobs, and you typically do a very good job, all sides, all individuals, of not breeding that culture, not falling into that habit ourselves, to not interact with one another adversarially, for the most part, for most issues. So I plan to continue, that way of carrying myself, and lead by example, as best as possible. Passion and emotion, and frankly, exhaustion sometimes plays a role.
Can I ask one simple change in the weekly report? That whoever's writing for the department identify who they are.
Like a signature at the end.
Just whatever, just
Out of source.
up top when it says Public Works, who is it? You know, is it always Tom, is it somebody else? Who is it? Because, you know, when you look through and you get somebody like Charlie that says this name, that name, that name, that name, okay, it's none of those people speaking, it's this other person here. We don't know who it is, you know,
And that's greatly helpful. That's one of the things that Tom brought up, that I know many departments say, what do you guys want? Because we'll happily try to adjust and provide a document that's more valuable to you, so, thank you.
I think I heard all of you say that you'd like the format for each department to be standard. Right? So it's the same type of format. And I think I also heard you say, and this is a question now, not a statement, maybe you'll tweak it for me, is that you like Lou's format.
We like Josh.
Bang, Lou, all right, Josh's, I'm sorry. You like, doesn't matter. You like Josh's format, am I correct? Okay.
I'm not a fan.
I like the theory behind it, but some of the color stuff.
Yeah, I like-
There's some movies that could be, he captures more of what has happened and what will happen, you know, that kind of thing.
I'm over 50, it can be difficult for me to read it all
I think
easily.
I think it would be a good idea, particularly because you're getting a number of these reports every 2 weeks. I think it'd be a great idea to standardize the format from a pure readability viewpoint. And I think if you want to have discussion now, have discussion now, or else just leave it to Carol to work on a standard format with her department heads. Send it out in that format, and then have discussion to say, hey, can we change such, you know, why don't you let the staff play with the standard format, ship it out to you in their next or whatever, you know, next time they do that, and then go from there. I think it should even, but I think from your perspective, with all, you know, the bigger the community, the more going on. The more going on, the more there is for you to address. The more going on for you to address, the more paper and memos and reports and statistics that you will get. And as Todd said, it is very time consuming. Not can be, it is for all of you. You know, it's sort of you're getting a part-time pay doing a full-time job. Not that it's about money, but it is the equivalent of a full-time job. So I think the easier staff can make it for you in some ways, the better. More efficient, let's just call it. The more, as I would say in my term from throughout all of this, the more effectively they can communicate with you to make your decision-making process easier or more efficient, then that's the bottom line. I really believe. It's all about effective communication. And much of what you've all been talking about now for several hours is all under the category, with all due respect, to effective communication. Respect, confidence, which all of those things add up to trust. And it is all about trust. And trust doesn't mean that you blindly trust someone, or you can't challenge a staff person or your fellow council member on a given issue. That's not it. You always have that right. You in fact have an obligation to be certain that you understand what it is you're voting on. And you have an obligation to be sure that you're creating policy which you think is the best for the public. You know, but to recognize that under effective communication, first of all, you're always going to have bumps in the road. It's an art and science you can never master. But you need to talk to one another on a regular basis about what it is that isn't working. And to recognize that not only is it okay, it is healthy to agree to disagree. That all runs with governance when people have diversity of opinion. And together, you deliberate, laugh and joke, be serious all at the same time about your differences, respect them, and then ultimately vote on whatever the given policy, the given matter before you is.
Dave, can I ask you, you said in your PowerPoint presentation that communication isn't thorough enough. Did we actually hit all the areas that you found to be issues? Or are there other issues where the communication isn't thorough enough? And correct me if I'm wrong, but I didn't think that note.
You have, with the exception of one. Okay? You absolutely have, with the exception of one. And that last one is sort of a funky one, I would use an adjective. And that is and I would have raised this question with you at the end here, only because it's my observation, my opinion. I think you need to have discussions about the ending time for your meetings. And I say that, and I'll give you my view, and then I'll stop, because I'm careful here at giving views, like my observations, my suggestions to you, my comments. Because this is not a matter of right and wrong, because quite frankly, governance is not a matter of right and wrong. I really wonder for people who are working all day, that get up at 6 or 7 o'clock in the morning, have jobs, have families, then come to a meeting when they're deliberating and using their brain, and they're passionate about what they do, and that starts at 7 o'clock. By the time we get to 11 o'clock at night, it's been one very, very long day for all of you involved. And I understand your dedication and your passion, and I understand the issues. You all talked about this growing list of issues. Remember I said to you before, one of the things that I see about Newark that makes it really a great opportunity, a great community, is what you have going for you. This half full and rising, not something else. You have lots of things going on here. It's a great community, it's a great city, it's a great place to live, work, and play. Sort of a mantra that us city managers, I don't know who in the world first quoted that, but we all love to talk about. Our community is a great place to live, work, and play. You are. It's here. There's so many of the pieces necessary. Okay? So I say that to answer your question about maybe you want to have a discussion about it.
We've raised that a number of times.
Oh, I know, Paul. I know it also because several of you mentioned it to me when I interviewed you. So I know that view is out there.
Well, I agree. I think we need to talk about it. No good decision can be made, in my opinion, after working all day, getting home at 5 o'clock, being in an executive session at 5:30, sometimes extremely intensive executive session, leaving, going to 7 o'clock council, and then being there till 2:30 in the morning. I am telling the truth when I say that it definitely affects your judgment, the hour that some important decisions are made. And you get up, you might get up the next day and go, why did I go that way? I totally meant to do something else. But I do think that the late hour is, if it's after 11, I don't think it's healthy. I don't think it's good for the community that we're making important decisions after 11 at night, and I don't think it's healthy for us after being sick for 3 weeks.
Well, I also don't think it's healthy for people that are there, like the gentleman on the special use permit at the last meeting, sat there for 4 hours before his agenda item came up. So I think we need to be prudent and think this through on what's the most effective thing to do. And maybe, from my perspective, I think an end time is something worth trying. And I think I would rather do that than pull things off the agenda, except the things that are required. So I think it's something we should talk about as well.
Now, it doesn't have to be 11,
No.
but an end time should be set.
I think it really does have to be. We're not now just thinking about all the extra costs here. We have to pay overtime to all staff members that are there. Also, the next day, their productivity is going to be extremely low. We have people that are going to call out, they're going to come in later. We had one staff member, also one with me. I was somebody pulled out in front of me, and my reaction time when it was like 3 o'clock in the morning. I can't believe somebody pulled in front of us in a car accident. But luckily, I was able to manage that, and someone else, one of the other staff members, came up to me and thanked me for saying that, because she was almost fell asleep at the wheel on the way home. Unfortunately, most people that work for the city do not live in the city. They live in Middletown, they live in Wilmington, or Maryland, putting those people at risk, even ourselves. And the productivity, again, is not going to be there. What I'd like to do is get the business of the city done first. At least that person will not, what we did to that gentleman, he was there at 1:30 in the morning, and then we had to tell him no because